When you think of the game of the year, what do you usually think of? Probably some big-budget AAA game, one that wowed everybody and got some of the highest review scores. And maybe it redefined a genre, maybe it created one. When you look at various Game of the Year winners from various game sites, there is often some contention. Some years, every single site will pick a completely different one, but sometimes there is a very clear winner. Overwatch clearly won 2016, and The Witcher 3 took 2015. Breath of the Wild clearly took 2017, though there were still some sites that gave it to others. In 2011, just about everyone agreed on Skyrim. And far back into the distant past of 1996, Super Mario 64 was the very clear winner. But when you line up various Game of the Year winners from various sites, what can you learn? Well, we learn how gaming has evolved, and which games pushed what gaming is capable of the most. Or perhaps we could find what sort of formula people really like, and give the most praise to. Super Mario 64 perfected early 3D platforming. GoldenEye brought the FPS genre to consoles. Resident Evil 4 invented the over-the-shoulder third-person shooter. Uncharted 2 became the big blockbuster game many other games now take after, and so on. More often than not, a Game of the Year isn't necessarily the best-selling game. It's not the most popular, it's just a game that was not only great, but did something for the entire industry. So what then, if we bumped all of this up into Game of the Decade? Sounds a bit daunting, doesn't it? What game could possibly be big enough to be considered a Game of the Decade? Well, Spike had the guts to make such a claim during the 2012 Game Awards, though their decade was for the decade that they had existed, so 2003 to 2012. But if we adjusted that for 2001 through 2010, I think I still agree with them. That award was given to Half-Life 2, a game that by today's standards is a bit dated, but there is no arguing over its objective greatness at the time it was released, and what it did for the entire gaming industry. Half-Life 2, first of all, was the sequel to the also critically acclaimed Half-Life, a game that essentially reinvented the first-person shooter, giving it a heavy story with dialogue. Before Half-Life, most shooters were just like Doom, Quake, or Duke Nukem. You would be dropped into a maze-like level with a gun, and you would reach the end, shooting a bunch of dudes. Sometimes story bits were added, but usually the story took the back seat. But now in Half-Life, you take the role of Gordon Freeman and watch as the story unfolds before you, and Half-Life 2 was more of the same, but better than ever. Half-Life 1 and 2 created the now much more popular style of first-person shooter. But what it did for the industry doesn't just end there, of course. Half-Life 2 brought with it the Source engine and all of its developments that would change gaming forever. Physics-based puzzles in 3D space. Objects could have varying degrees of weight and move through the air differently depending on their shape. It was physics. The first time physics was in a real AAA game that was also not that terrible. So many physics-based games would come after it, and elements of physics would begin finding its ways into games of all genres eventually. And that's all thanks to Half-Life 2. And it doesn't stop there. The character animations were a first for the industry as well. Cutscenes that unfolded as you interacted with the world. Characters would even move and animate their facial expressions and mouths to their words, and all in real time rather than a pre-rendered cutscene. This was all made possible because of a new animation method that has since become the industry standard. Games had correct mouth animation before, but typically that was all either in pre-rendered cutscenes or through manually animated mouths for each sequence, a long and costly process. But with Half-Life 2's method of computer-generated lip syncing, games would never look better and would be significantly more budget-friendly. And there is even more than that, of course, but this video isn't about Half-Life 2 specifically. But overall, it is hard to argue against the status of Half-Life 2 as the game of the decade, especially when you include its added episodes, which only further perfected its formula and is still influencing games to this day. There are other contenders for the game of that decade, of course, but none have a list of achievements or as much influence as Half-Life 2 does. But now comes the real question you all clicked this video for. What game released between 2011 and 2020 could possibly stack up and sit next to Half-Life 2 as another game of the decade? Perhaps it hasn't come out yet. This video is being made at the end of 2017, so we still have plenty of time to go, but looking at where the industry is headed and where we've been, I'd argue that we already have this decade's game of the decade. So, what are the contenders? Well, let's look at some of this decade's games of the year so far. Uncharted 4 was a blockbuster hit, but it didn't do too many new things, only perfected some previously existing things. Dragon Age Inquisition, Mass Effect 2, Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto 5, yeah, these are all big names that pushed their genres further, but nothing that hasn't been done before or since greater. Though GTA 5 could win via popularity alone with its sales and influence on the entire industry. And while Skyrim didn't start the open world phenomenon we had and are still having this decade, along with 2008's GTA 4, the two of them definitely made this genre more popular and mainstream. But Skyrim at this point is becoming a meme. It was amazing and mind-blowing for 2011, but nearly a decade of aging hasn't done it any favors. And if you take away the modding community, what else is there? Bugs. And game fans are beginning to see through it, and pay more attention to its flaws. XCOM Enemy Unknown from 2012 revived a genre that was only barely alive before it, but other than some modern updates, it didn't resonate through the industry as much as a game of the decade should. 2012's Journey is a good one. This was that game that really cried out to the masses that gaming has matured. Gaming can be an art form, see? And its influence can be seen throughout indie games everywhere and even a few AAA games now. Journey's influence on the market also further convinced more game players to put more trust into indie games, which only further strengthened the indie boom that games like Journey and 2010's Super Meat Boy were responsible for. So far, Journey is our best contender, and its influence on the whole gaming market and popularity of indie games in general would fit nicely next to Half-Life 2's level of influence. Certainly it fits there better than games like The Last of Us, a game that was certainly great, but was also just another big blockbuster game. Even 2011's Dark Souls, a mighty influential subgenre creator, doesn't stand up to the level of influence of Journey. Mario Kart 8, Portal 2, The Witcher 3, they all did amazing things for their genres and for gaming as a whole, but they are hills to the mountain of Journey and Half-Life 2. So what then? Because I'll tell you now, Journey is only what I've deduced as the second place winner of Game of the Decade, so I'd love it if right now, without looking ahead at the comments or the future of the video, go to the comments right now and type what you think Game of the Decade is, or at least what you think I'm going to say it is. I'll wait just a bit. Okay, that was enough. You should have paused the video anyway. Completely objectively, not letting any personal opinions in here, I am pretty sure the answer that we are looking for what is the game of this decade is 2011's Minecraft. Now, you calm yourself. I know I've created a few types of reactions with such a claim. There are those who immediately were like, oh, yeah, now that you mention it, obviously that's the case. And then there are those like, oh my God, you can't be serious? Minecraft is crap! The worst game with the worst fan base ever! In other words, people being objective versus people being subjective and ignored pretty much everything else I've said this entire video. We aren't judging games based on their fan bases here. We're judging them based on their industry influence and what they have done for gaming. And first off, Minecraft is also a huge part of the indie explosion along with Super Meat Boy and Journey. It too plays a part in the existence of such a sizable market for indie games. Plus, it also contributed to the open world sandbox phenomenon along with Skyrim, and that pretty much defines this entire decade of gaming. Plus, Minecraft is the second highest selling game of all time, and the only games it's surrounded by in that category are either games that were packaged with a popular system like Wii Sports and Super Mario Bros., or are parts of majorly popular franchises that have already been around for forever, like Mario, Pokemon, Tetris, and Grand Theft Auto. Minecraft brought voxel-based programming back to the forefront and reinvented the random map generator creator, pulling it out of its near exclusiveness to the real-time and grand strategy genres. Minecraft created a genre that so many other games of varying quality have emulated. Even some AAA games now are taking influence from this indie title. And Minecraft not only created a genre of games, but it pretty much created a genre of YouTube video. Minecraft's fanbase is like no other, be it in dedication or in its sheer size alone. Minecraft is introducing video games to a whole new generation of kids. It's being used as a teaching tool in some schools now. It's bringing in a whole new surge of video game fans that caused the gaming industry to suddenly grow rapidly. And back to the YouTube point, YouTube played a massive role in gaming this decade, and it may continue to do so as long as it stops making so many dumb mistakes. And no other video game has as many YouTube videos or YouTubers dedicated to it. Minecraft is a mass media phenomenon. And you know what else Minecraft was a part of this decade? The explosion of mobile gaming. Be it Minecraft clones or Minecraft Pocket Edition, it too contributed to the rise of a whole new medium of gaming that only got more people into gaming. So, for better or for worse, you can't argue about the influence of Minecraft. Minecraft most certainly deserves a spot next to Half-Life 2, and even though I'm not a huge fan of it anymore, I would argue that it deserves to be an even higher tier than Half-Life 2. And I wonder if anything will ever compare again. Perhaps a Minecraft 2, but I don't know. What are your thoughts? Does any other game really compare? Perhaps what other games do you think are at least as influential as Journey, and why? And will a phenomenon like Minecraft ever happen again? I really don't know anymore. So let me know your thoughts down below, and until next time, you never stop using your noggin.